was like a centipede. It was a real centipede, though over 30 feet long. Its face, if it could be called, that had abnormally sharp fangs. This was the strongest insect she could summon, whip bug. Entoma began bracing her legs. She collected most of the data she needed about the humans in front of her, their attack speed, destructive power, defense, evasion, and mobility. The only thing she wasn't sure of was how Tia would address the situation, but that wasn't worth getting anxious about. Oops. Entoma felt around below her face. There was a clear, sticky liquid. I thought I was full, but I guess all this exercise made me hungry again. The fluid clinging to her hand was drool proof of her yearning for the two humans who were no longer anything besides food to her. Humans were her favorite, but until now, she had to subsist on green cookies and be satisfied with that. Of course, she didn't hold it against the supreme beings. On the contrary, Entoma felt she was being given generous consideration. For example, when villagers were captured and used in healing experiments, she was allowed to eat their severed arms. Still, on some level, she was just putting up with the situation. So when faced with these excellent specimens who would make for the highest quality foodstuff, she couldn't throw away the chance without taking even a single bite. The two humans shivered under Entoma's ravenous gaze. This reaction didn't stem from fear of their powerful enemy's bloodlust, but from a physiological instinct born of being targeted by a predator. Ki-ya-ra! With a shrill battle cry, like two pieces of styrofoam rubbing together, Entoma went on the offensive for the first time in this fight. The motions of this predator hunting down her prey were direct and bizarrely fast. By the time the shield bug had deflected the 6 throwing knives hurled her way, there was barely any distance left between them. When Entoma saw Gagarin out front with her weapon at the ready, she decided whose she would neutralize first. She lashed out with the whip in her right hand. The longer a whip is, the slower its tip will move. That was a given. It was natural, even for someone with superhuman strength like Entoma, but that assumed the weapon was like any ordinary whip. What Entoma wielded was the strongest summoning she could accomplish with her bug tamer abilities. Normally, a whip would approach in a circular motion, but this one moved in an impossible way. It approached Gagarin quick as lightning, like an extension of Entoma's arm, twisting at acute zigzag angles. Even an adventurer who experienced all sorts of unknowns wouldn't have had a chance to see or experience inconceivable movements like these. Only a cross between a living being and a weapon could perform this way. It was utterly natural to be at a loss during one's first encounter, but her ability to dodge it nonetheless proved she was an adamantite rank adventurer, the highest rank adventurer. Gagarin just barely avoided the bug whip. It whizzed past the side of her face. Watch out! The same moment Tia screamed, Gagarin was sent flying by Tia's ninjutsu, ring of fire bombs, which she set off knowing it would hit both herself and her teammate. As the flames and explosive blast enveloped the pair, the whip bug suddenly made a hairpin turn. It passed through the space where Gagarin's head had been. Without Tia's resolve to take drastic measures, the whip bug would have undoubtedly decapitated Gagarin. It was a decent evasive tactic, but Entoma's attacks didn't end there. As if bound by a leash, the whip bug abruptly changed direction and headed for sooty, blackened Gagarin. At the same time, Entoma threw a talisman in Tia's direction. It was the Thunderbird talisman. In midair, it transformed into a bird discharging pale blue shocks. It flew toward Tia. When facing two opponents, one of them could be left to a bug. That was one of the good things about being a tamer. A burst of electricity bathed the area in a pale blue light. It illuminated Gagarin, who was trying to subdue the whip bug, and Tia in her pain. Damn it, I hate creepy crawlies. Holding the bug's head down with her war pick, Gagarin tried to pin it against her left flank, but it took advantage of its full 30 feet to wrap around her body. A dagger Tia threw mid-charge crashed into Entoma's shield bug with a clang. Wild flight of Thunderbird talisman. Entoma scattered several talismans with her left hand. They changed into birds slightly smaller than the previous one and assaulted Tia all at once. Tia, however, disappeared. The birds flew off when they failed to detect her. The ninja loomed in the darkness behind Entoma, outside her field of vision. Tia had used short-distance teleportation, but Entoma had already found her. Some bugs have antennae. The additional sense Entoma had was possible thanks to an organ very much like those. This organ detected changes in airflow. She shot a few remaining bullet bugs at Tia, who oozed out of the shadows into the open. Cug. The grunt of pain was accompanied by the smell of fresh blood, but Entoma judged that her opponent still had the will to fight and made a follow-up attack. Bombing talisman, an explosion larger than Tia-S broke the night's stillness. The ninja was sent flying. As she tumbled across the ground, Entoma threw more charms at her sharp slash and colliding winds. Without a chance to stand up, Tia was cut and blasted, rolling away in a trail of blood. Tia, you buggy bitch. Gagarin's insult came from the center of a lumpy sphere. The whip bug was completely coiled around her. The plan had probably been for Gagarin to subdue the whip bug with her strength, and for Tia to take on Entoma herself. Entoma sneered beneath her mask. All she could say was that they'd been too foolish. Humans of this caliber never had any chance of defeating Entoma, a member of the great tomb of Nazarick Pleiades. The smartest thing for them to do would have been to ignore that she was eating humans and withdraw as fast as they could. They were in this situation precisely because of that error of judgment. I went out of order, but I guess that can be helped. In any case, you've got a lot of muscle, so you should be plenty substantial and tasty. Entoma summoned a bug. This one wasn't fiendishly dangerous in a fight, but its slender, syringe-like body contained a paralyzing poison. With the bug in hand, Entoma approached Tia with a light step. She'll make a great souvenir. There were quite a few creatures who preyed on humans in the great tomb of Nazarick. Entoma was sure they would be delighted. What's this? Entoma's superior senses detected something long, thin, and cold approaching from overhead, and she leaped aside. At that same moment, a spear jammed into the spot where she'd been standing. It was a lance like a knight might use, made out of crystal, but it was no ordinary make. The fragile crystal had broken the cobblestones without so much as cracking itself. Magic, I suppose. Psychic caster Entoma sensed something from the lance that anyone with a magic-using class would understand. That's right. A Tier 4 arcane spell, Crystal Lance. The one who answered was a figure who had gently alighted on the end of the shaft, a short, robed woman wearing a mask. She spoke with a young-sounding voice. Another one. Entoma was getting sick of this. Just as she thought she'd captured a delicious meal, another intruder had appeared. At this point, it would have been harsh to tell her to restrain herself. Could I have you leave it at that? Who are you? The woman drew out the sound. If you leave right now, I'll forgive you. So can you go off somewhere? She continued, I like tender children, but there aren't so many parts of them you can eat. I'll fight you after I eat these too. I see. A monster that feeds on humans, huh? Entoma asked. Is that maid get-up you're wearing some kind of joke? I can imagine anyone would be happy to have a monster who reeks of blood serving them. Say that again, you little bitch. Entoma let her real voice slip. She grabbed her throat. The newcomer's remarks were so unforgivable, she nearly lost herself in violent emotion. She was seized by the urge to rip this girl limb from limb, not by the principle of survival of the fittest, but out of contempt. What did she just say to me? One of the Pleiades of the great tomb of Nazarick, who serves the supreme beings? Hellfire crackled and popped in the pit of her stomach. You're dead. She couldn't help her voice, but she felt her back bulging. She frantically tried to keep at least that under control. Everly, Entoma learned the masked woman's name, the name of the opponent she had to kill with all her might when Tia shouted it. I wondered what you guys were doing. Good grief, this is some elementary stuff. Think about the difference in ability between you and your opponent. This one is stronger than you guys, but weaker than me. With a flourish of her cape, Everly shouted, how dare you bully my comrades, monster. Now I'll give you a taste and see how you like it. Better be grateful. Entoma couldn't have cared less about the shouts from beneath her opponent's mask. Steeped in murder, she charged. Her brain, ruled by hatred, was barely conscious of the other two any longer. They were just bothersome little pebbles. You say there's no one who would be happy to have me serve them. The words went around and around in her head. She moved her whip bug. Apart from the 3 feet or so she was holding on to, the rest was in a huge ball. At its core, of course, was Gagarin. I'll crush you and your comrades. You awful woman. Her blow fell like a hammer. HMPH, what a pitiful attack. Everly didn't break her composure. Reverse gravity. Entoma resisted the spell, but her whip bug became weightless and floated into the air. As a rule, Gear resisted when the equipper did, but in the case of a bug weapon, it wasn't T the tamer, but the bug itself who had to do the resisting. That led to situations like this one, where Entoma didn't get affected, but the whip bug did. The bug may have been able to attack on its own, but this was one of its drawbacks. Naturally, having been hit with that spell, Entoma was forced to discard her original plan. Sensing Entoma's intentions, the whip bug withdrew its entire 30-plus foot length from Gagarin all at once, like a tape measure winding up. Meanwhile, Gagarin fell to the ground. Everlai gave her instructions. Gagarin, you ray in the way, heal Tia's wounds or something. If your gauntlets are out of power, use a potion. Injured humans would recover. If that was all, there was no issue. Neither of those women was capable of fighting Entoma, but adding the caster in front of her into the equation changed things. Everlai was on an equal footing with Entoma. If she received even a little support, the battle would tilt to Entoma's disadvantage. So Entoma decided, although she didn't really want to use her true ace move. She already used it once to annihilate all the enemies in the mansion, but she could still unleash it 2 more times. The move was spewing out meat-eating flies fly breath. This breath released a mass of flies that didn't eat away at meat, but instead bored into flesh and left maggots, like botflies. They dealt damage over time as the maggots burrowed into the victim's body. Even more terrifyingly, that wasn't all. The flies that emerged would form a huge, cloud-like army and attack anyone within range, with a few special exceptions. Entoma opened her throat wide, baring her true mouth, which was near where a human's jaw would normally be. To an onlooker, it probably looked like her jaw had been split. With a retching noise, she spit up a glob of insects. Hey. Don't tell me that ability has something to do with an evil spirit. If that's the case, Everlai created a white fog to intercept the flies. A chill attack was a clever way to intercept, but it would have a hard time providing complete protection. The best solution would have been a spell, or something that caused a blast to scatter the swarm. She messed up. Entoma imagined Everlai being eaten up by maggots, but the counterspell greatly surpassed all her expectations. The flies bathed in the fog dropped to the ground, and then the haze enveloped Entoma. That moment she was assailed by unbelievable agony. Agh! The maid's face was steaming. She was writhing like she'd been doused with acid. Everlai had meant only to render her opponent's breath attack ineffective, but it appeared that she'd inadvertently discovered her true identity. Whoa, can we make it? Gagarin, war pick at the ready, was watching for a chance to charge. As an excellent warrior, she must have seen that this was where the battle would be decided. Really, judging from their opponent's capabilities, they needed to end this fight now, and as quickly as possible. The reason Gagarin didn't charge was that the flailing 30-foot whip bug wouldn't let her get close. Still, it seemed like the futile resistance of someone who was already defeated. What the heck was that spell? Everlai answered Tia's question. An insecticide spell, Vermin Bane. One of the evil spirits from 200 years ago had an aspect of an insect. I developed this to exterminate the bugs it used. It's one of my original creations. Hey, it won't hurt us, will it? No, it works specifically against bugs and has no effect on any other living thing. Her face is melting. Tia, that's because she's actually a her. No, that's not a face. As if it had been waiting for Everlai's shout, the maid's attractive features sagged and fell to the ground with a splat. It looked like the skin of her face had sloughed off, but that wasn't it. The underside of the skin that had dropped to the ground was covered in insectoid legs. Are you serious? A mask-shaped bug, Guha. With a violent retching noise, the maid exposed her throat. A single fissure ran along her extremely rigid-looking neck, and a rather large glob of liquid spilled out. It looked like vomit, but it was definitely something else. It started to squirm on the ground. What the? Even Everlai gasped at the scene playing out before their eyes. She'd never seen anything like it in all her long life. A lip bug. That's what Tia called the soaked, leech-like creature writhing on the cobblestones. It's a bug that consumes human vocal cords and then produces the victim's voice. The tip of the skin-colored leech resembled human lips. It was gasping in the adorable voice the maid had been speaking with earlier. As everyone stared, the hand covering the maid's face slowly moved away. The features she revealed were practically an insect, as all the blue roses recoiled from her strange appearance. They had guessed as soon as the masked bug had fallen to the ground, and they saw how effective the insecticide was. But having the reality before their eyes still sent a jolt of terror through them. They felt dirty knowing that a monster this far removed from humanity had managed to infiltrate their world. You. It was a stiff-sounding voice that was difficult to understand. Well, isn't your voice just the cutest thing now? I like this one better, Gagarin spat in disgust, overflowing with hostility. Of all the blue roses, she was perhaps the most human. She wanted to offer some small gesture to the poor girl whose voice the bug had originally stolen. She seemed to grip her weapon even more tightly. YUHUMNNNN. Earlier in the fight, their opponent had always appeared composed. But now she lost her calm. If that was the case, there was no longer any time to conserve power. They needed to start with fierce attacks. The real battle begins now. Don't let your guard down, you two. Know that she'll be attacking even more brutally than before. Everly warned the other two, but knowing them, they didn't need to be told. They'd probably been ready to risk their lives since the moment the fight began. The bug maid's back swelled. 4 long appendages spider legs surged out from beneath her clothes. It looked like she was carrying them on her back. Using her new legs, she made an incredible leap, almost as if she'd used fly. With the height advantage, the monster spewed carnivorous flies down on all of them. Clicking her tongue, Everly cast Vermin Bane again. You're the only one I am scared of. If I can just kill you, the rest are a routine job. The bug maid landed. All the flies she spit up were dead. She glared straight at Everly with her compound eyes. It was probably true that Everly was the only one who could fight on equal footing with her. If Everly lost, this phase of the battle would be decided. Gagarin and Tia would surely be slaughtered, but Intoma's decision to limit her focus to one opponent was still a mistake. Arg, Gagarin struck with her war pick from the side. No matter how superior Everly was, this powerful warrior wouldn't just leave things up to her. She would fight. She might have known there was a good chance she'd be intercepted and seriously wounded, but she would fight alongside her comrade. Everly smiled at her beneath her mask, the kind of expression she'd be too embarrassed to make without something covering her face. The monster went to dodge Gagarin's attack, but paused for a mere instant due to Tia's ninjutsu, unyielding chains. She seemed to have immunity rather than resistance, so the trap skill was unable to stop her completely. But the creation of even the smallest opening was enough for Gagarin. The monster countered Gagarin's strike, extra powerful thanks to strong blow, by spitting spider silk enough to turn the warrior's entire upper body pure white. The thread was both sticky and rigid. Even Gagarin with her strong arms didn't seem able to rip it apart so easily. She aborted her attack and tottered to the rear. Instead, the monster charged. Crystal Lance, a translucent missile shot toward the beastly girl. The lance struck its target and sunk in deep, but she didn't seem to feel any pain. She was calm enough to begin amassing countless bugs from the dark night. They swarmed around her left arm. Vermin Bane, the white fog whooshed toward them. The bugs on the monster's arm fell to the ground. She let out another pained scream. Her mouth, where a human's jaw would have been, aimed for Everly and spewed the same spider silk that had targeted Gagarin. Blocking it with magic would be a waste of MP. I am immune to hold type techniques, so I guess I should just take it. Wait, no. Everly panicked and cast a spell. The substance from the monster's mouth was definitely a form of thread, but it shone as if it was harder than what had hit her companion. Crystal wall. The crystal wall before her eyes broke into pieces, as if it'd been slashed up by a sharp blade, and disappeared. So it's a spiderweb that can slice. Here's a present for you. Tia threw a net of black threads. It spread out in the air, but it didn't tangle up the monster. It passed through her body like an illusion and fell to the ground, so she really does have complete resistance to obstruction. Time to strategize, Gagarin said, disgusted. She kicked the maid away, which also put some space between them. Surprisingly, when her foot met the maid's outfit, it made a metallic noise. The other blue roses, on alert for area of effect attacks, joined Gagarin as she retreated to gain some distance from the bug maid. Dammit. Coming to attack me, how annoying. Gagarin watched the maid snap her lower jaw and spoke softly to Everly. Did you hear that sound just now? That maid outfit can be as hard as my weapon, can it? It seems to be woven from some type of tough metallic thread. Judging from how thin it is, that material must be overwhelmingly harder than your boot. harder than adamantite. Not only that, all her gear is high-class stuff. My earth magic doesn't seem to do much. That means something she's equipped with must decrease any magic damage we deal her.